So let's see. Peg, are we good to go?
We are good to go.
Okay, thanks. And can you hear me fine? Peg, am I clearly audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you very much. Great. So here we are on the second morning of this 4-day retreat, and looking at this term original love. As I've been saying, it's sort of you can see in the world of meditation that there are various ways it's approached, and most schools emphasize one or perhaps two of those modes. Zen is cognizant of several, but emphasizes more this or more that, depending on the school. And but the point really, the most important point is that this, what I'm calling original love, refracts through all of them. It's actually, it must do, because in a way, what it is this moment. You know, whatever level we're experiencing this moment on, whether it's thoroughly contracted, painful, full of suffering, highly dualistic, you know, actually, even on that level, it's here. It's obviously harder for it to penetrate us and reach us, but it is in fact here. And getting our basic present moment awareness more settled so that we can actually inhabit the sort of raw material of this moment and be open to it and experience it, which is what, we've been trying to do in some ways all along, all through our practice. That's one way of coming into a little bit of contact with this original love. Whether we are more, spiritually / religiously inclined and are open to the sense of there being disembodied support, that too is a way of approaching it, receiving, opening to this original love. And there's many different ways that in that zone that can manifest. Whether we're opening up to exploring, engineering ways of tasting non-dual awareness, then we're getting a bit more direct in discovering, sensing for ourselves a level of experience that is utterly pervasive, and and is all embracing and all welcoming, and is therefore, loving. Or whether we're going full out for, what Zen would call awakening, which is really thoroughly letting go, body and mind drop away, and there's just a boundless, marvelous absence. But that absence contains everything, and each thing contains it totally. So, from this point of view, this is when we're really, I think, fair to say, getting more fully cognizant of this original love, experiencing it more fully, more thoroughly. And why is it love? Well, I hope we'll just discover that for ourselves. I think it's not unreasonable to call it that. Now, so having said all that, let us, but remembering that this particular retreat, although all zones are open and they never can't be, it's not, there's no caging this stuff, it's wild and free and wildly beyond all our scheming. But nevertheless, the focus is more on the sort of nuts and bolts of basic practice in this retreat. And because that's as good a way as any, actually, to open up to this original love. So we're going to stay in that territory a bit more than in others. And I hope that you'll all find and agree that that's a very helpful and wise thing to do. Now, yes, one thing that came up that we started looking at yesterday and came up more in questions, and I think it's such an important point. I want to give it a little more attention today. About these 5 hindrances, the first one being desire, and there being a thread all through Buddhist history, Buddhist tradition of practice and history of practice, on preference, desire, on like and dislike. It shows up in many ways. 4 Noble Truths. The second one is the source of suffering is desire, or craving, or hankering, or yearning, whatever. And then the 3 poisons. The first one again is greed or desire, craving. And in the 12 links of causation, there's grasping and there's clinging. I think there may be number 7 and 8, or 8 and 9. I can't exactly remember in the 12 links. And in and then again, of course, in these 5 hindrances, the first 2 are desire and aversion. Now, actually, in a certain way, my hunch is that if we get to grips with desire, it's really the crucial one. Now, what does that mean? Well, I'm gonna move to a totally different tradition to just set up some thoughts about desire. And here is I'm reading from this philosopher Bill Irvine here, his book On Desire, which is a wonderful book. Gets a little dense in the middle, but you'll see if any of you try it. Especially the latter part is terrific, and the early start. So this is a quote from it. And by the way, he's setting up how many religions and philosophies have emphasized either extinguishing desire or sort of getting, so to speak, on top of it. He says here, even Buddha didn't actually totally succeed in extinguishing desire. After his enlightenment, he retained a number of desires: to breathe, to eat, and most notably, to share with others the source of his enlightenment. And by the way, the source of his enlightenment was cessation of desires. So these 3 remaining desires were really, you could say, just in the service of helping others, all 3 of them. Because if he didn't breathe and eat, he couldn't share the Dharma with others. How will we know when we have, quote, mastered desire? We shall experience what, as we shall see, has been the goal of most of those who have thought carefully about desire: a feeling of tranquility. This should not be confused with the kind of tranquility brought on by the ingestion of a tranquilizer. It is instead marked, and this is a nice bit, it is instead marked by a sense that we are lucky to be living whatever life we happen to be living. That despite our circumstances, no key ingredient of happiness is missing. With this sense comes a diminished level of anxiety. We no longer need to obsess over the things: a new car, a bigger house, a firmer abdomen, that we mistakenly believe will bring lasting happiness if we only can obtain them. More importantly, if we master desire to the extent possible to do so, we will no longer despise the life we are forced to live, and will no longer daydream about living the life someone else is living. Instead, we will embrace our own life and live it to the fullest. This sense that actually the best life of all is not some one we see others living, which may be more materially copious, abundant. That's not the best life. The best life is this moment as it is given to us. Now I'm going to just go a little further in this, and this is rather an interesting line from Schopenhauer, who I have to confess I haven't read myself, but he's quoted here, and he says this: limitation always makes for happiness. We are happy in proportion as our range of vision, our sphere of work, our points of contact with the world are restricted and circumscribed. This is a healthy reminder for meditators who seat themselves in one square yard for days on end, maybe weeks on end. And then Bill Irvine comments on that. If you fail to restrain yourself, you will always want more, and will thereby put yourself on the satisfaction treadmill. By placing limits on your use of, say, credit, you are acknowledging your own potential insatiability. You're announcing to yourself that in this case at least, you'd better learn to be satisfied with a limited amount of credit. You know, I mean, he's actually talking this part about insatiability being essentially endless. And Schopenhauer and Dr. Irvine are picking up on one of the Roman Stoics, Seneca, who categorized desires into two kinds, natural and unnatural. Natural desires are limited. Those which spring from false views have nowhere to stop, for falsity has no point of termination. So again, Dr. Irvine commenting on that, our desire for water when we are thirsty is a natural desire. If we are thirsty and drink, our thirst will be quenched. Our desire for wealth, on the other hand, is unnatural, since no matter how much wealth we gain, we will want more. Seneca advises us to think twice before acting to satisfy an unnatural desire. So I think this is, very much in line with Buddhist thinking and the centrality of desire as key to our well-being. It's something, that may rub against us a bit and go against the grain of this culture and social system we live in, where we have all subliminally and not so subliminally been receiving messages of wanting, consuming, getting, acquiring as sort of the road to well-being. And we may have a more deep-seated views about that than we like to think we do. Just before I read this next passage, I just want to just tug us back a little bit to the five hindrances. And, the way we practice with them is to, essentially, the protocol might be, if you're having a difficult sit, difficult to settle, just do a quick, Rolodex through the 5 hindrances. See, is one of them pertinent now? Is it arising now? And if you think it might be, then what is the experience of that in the body? Yeah, you might have some cognitions about it as well. But mostly we try to practice with body sensation if one is present. If it's not present, what is that like? Go further into its absence. Explore what this moment is like with no hindrance. Being present. Nothing holding back the flow of the river. That you're just untethered. The mind is unfettered. There's no bond. There's no fetter. There's no attachment. Restraining the heart and mind. Sort of just flowing out into this moment. Infinitely. I mean, that's the absence of hindrance. It's not a fixed quantity when it's absent. It's boundless. Our capacity, our openness, our freedom to join this moment is unrestricted. So practicing with the hindrances is a great way of sort of handling a difficulty in practice, and a great way of opening to possibility in practice. So I hope you all log that, it's not just sort of a taming the negative kind of thing. It's got a very positive side as well. And this whole thing of whether it's mastering desire, exhausting desire, extinguishing desire. Actually, I think exhausting is not the right word. It's because one of the points is that they're inexhaustible, as we say in the 4 vows, the second one. Desire, aversion, delusion are inexhaustible. But I'll end them anyway. So no matter how many times this hindrance arises, I will welcome it, and it will release, and I will be released, and there's a sort of mutual releasing, opening, expansion, freedom, meeting of the moment, endlessly meeting, and becoming the moment, because there's just no one left. There's just no one left to need to meet the moment. So this, this present moment awareness practice, it perhaps doesn't have an upper limit, it doesn't have a depth limit, how far it can take us into boundless appreciation. He was talking about how lucky we are to have this life, and recognizing that as it is in this moment. Really, it's this moment. So I don't know that there's a limit to how much our appreciation can grow. I don't know that there's a limit to that. Okay, now, so that's some points on on desire and the hindrances, picking up from yesterday. I mean, in some way, I sometimes wonder whether, I'm sure I know there are people who know this all much better than I do, but is it possible that it's enough to work with only the first hindrance? I mean, or is it possible that in each of the others, somehow the underlying symptomology is still desire? That, aversion is desire flipped. It's simply wanting the absence of something. And, well, sloth and torpor, I mean, as you know, I'm rather, I feel tenderly disposed towards the ragged modern nervous system. So I don't like to just dismiss fatigue as a hindrance. I don't know. I think it might be that we need to listen to it. But anyway, let's shelve Henry's view. The old view is that it's a hindrance. But is there, in fact, in there a desire to be feeling differently? A desire to not be sleepy, or a desire to have sleep? Could desire still be operational in there? And then when it comes to restlessness, probably we're antsy, we want to be somewhere else, right? Isn't that also a desire? Worry, well, we're fretting about something, we're wanting to tend to it, to make it go away. Funny how often it pays off actually to do the sit, to not leap up and try to put out a fire, I mean, figuratively, but just to sit and trust and open up to a deeper space, a deeper reality. Somehow it's just the reality of rest and settledness that's always available, actually, of balance. So just tasting that for a little chunk of time, often we may find the thing we were fretting about, either it's sorted itself out without us, or it didn't go the fearful way we thought it might, or we've got a clearer sense of how to approach it. Because often when we approach things out of, the restlessness of worry, we don't approach them the most effective way. And if only we had taken a moment, or 20 moments, or 25 moments to just settle first, we would handle them more effectively. Okay, and then the fifth hindrance, doubt. Could that be like wanting a certainty about practice, wanting some confirmation that yes, this is the right way for me, or yes, I've got the affirmation I wanted that this method is trustworthy? Again, I mean, I'm just, speculating, but could it be that desire is an ingredient, maybe an important ingredient of all of the hindrances, and therefore if we can recognize desire when it arises in us in its various guises and give it space, which is a different thing from simply being driven by it. We give it space in this moment. We don't give it a, what's that, the horse or carriage term, give it a long rein, give it the rein, I think they say, meaning let it do what it wants to do, let it lead us. Instead of doing that, give it space. You might think the two are the same, not at all. Giving it space means allowing the sensation and experience of desire to be present, letting it be part of our present moment experience. Okay, that's very different from simply going with it. If we're doing that, if we're giving it space, the current of the river of practice is strong. It doesn't have to not have desire in it. It just needs to allow for it. If it allows for it, actually the sluice gates are closed, and we're present, and we're fuller, we're more capacious, and we're growing. There's a difference between, growing as opposed to sort of just hurrying along being driven. Okay, now last point I think that I do want to bring up is this sense of because we're talking about mindfulness, present moment awareness, present moment experience, openness to it. And, of course, mostly we're talking about it, as the individual experience, and to some extent the sort of shared experience as practitioners together. But we simply, I think we're just, it's not right really to leave it like that in this day and age, or probably any day and age. And because especially as, in the old days, they could justify just sort of doing one's own practice for awakening, because they had the karmic rebirth, construction and understanding of things, so you individually were sort of rising to the surface, at which point you could break out into awakening or something like that, life by life. But we don't have that view. I mean, you tell, I don't know what most of your opinions are about that, but we don't really, certainly not as a culture, we don't have that view. And because we don't, we instead have, we're more at home in a view of social responsibility. It's actually not something foreign to us Westerners at all. It's been creeping in, some would say, ever since the Abrahamic prophets, those Old Testament, or is it the Torah, or I don't know, wherever they are in the Jewish body, those prophets, maybe they're just called the prophets, they railed against injustice. That was one of the primary things they did. They put themselves on the line and spoke truth to power. Which typically in those days meant beheading, but they did it anyway. And now here we are as practitioners of loving awareness. We have to sort of, as one of my mentors said, an outing of the landscape that we're in. Outing meaning bringing into attention, bringing into awareness. And we all know really what this is about these days. A lot of it is about white privilege and the denialism that has long gone as part of that. It's okay to recognize that we're not talking about individual failings in a way here, but we're talking about a system that we're all carrying, that we're all part of, and to become more aware of it, and are more aware of the ways we've preferred not to notice it, if we have, has, I think, got to be part of our practice. And in a way, it goes hand in glove with this practice, because we can actually study what in our internal condition is conditioned or shaped by external conditions, by history, by socioeconomic disadvantage and socioeconomic disparity, socioeconomic inequities in our culture. We know from our deeper experience that there's a level of our reality right now in this moment that is inseparable. Inseparability, all inclusive, meaning we include all. Literally what it means. Each of us includes all. And that, of course, includes all beings. And that includes of course, includes all human beings. So why would we not, really, well, let's please be inspired and motivated by our practice to do what we can to work against racism. And at a time like this, to work against fascism, which most of us thought had been pretty much stamped out from the Western world in 1945. That whole war was about eradicating fascism. And, probably a good number of us, grew up in the shadow of that with a fairly recent memory of it in the zeitgeist. And, look at it, 75 years on? It hasn't by any means been forgotten. There's still blockbuster movies about the Holocaust. And yet, we maybe aren't sufficiently awake to, I'm sure, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be preaching to the choir. I'm sure many of you are doing a lot more than I am, but let us do what we can, to work against division and dangerous stoking of, the very things we work in ourselves against. These three poisons, above all of separation, separating ourselves from, believing we're separate from, believing we can exist separately, independently. It's a falsehood. It's a falsehood through and through. So, and this becomes clearer and clearer quite naturally as we practice more. Okay, so thank you extremely much for your patient listening. And I just hope that, something like these words can just be at least a little bit of encouragement and inspiration in your practice. This is a very, very real practice. It's getting more real about this moment. It's meeting the reality of this moment more and more vividly, thoroughly. And it's an amazing thing to be able to be alive now as a human being in this very moment, right now, as it is. So thank you, and I'm so grateful for the support and encouragement that you all give, we all receive as a sitting together Sangha. Thank you.